All right, let's get rolling. Thanks everyone for joining us. Business as usual is back this early Thursday morning. We're here with Joan Bibelhausen, and we're going to talk about sort of the unique circumstances and the new kinds of issues that Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers is addressing as a part of our, apologies for using the vernacular, our new normal. So Joan, I wonder if you might just start by introducing yourself. I'm guessing all of our members know who you are, but give us a reminder, tell us who you are, your role with Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers.
Well, thanks, Mike. I'm delighted to be here. So my name is Joan Bibelhausen, and I'm the Executive Director of Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers, which has been around 44 years. I've been at LCL for 15 of those. And we provide help on any issue that causes stress or distress to lawyers, judges, law students, and your immediate family members. And we will also take calls from legal office staff. We've got a 24-hour line. We've got 4 free counseling sessions and referrals. We've got peer support. We've got groups. We've got all kinds of things going on to support you. We like to talk about, you know, when if you go see a counselor because you're dealing with some stress and there's some things going on, they're going to help you with what's going on inside your head. But as we look at our profession and the changes we're going through, LCL is also here to help you as you navigate what's going on inside your world. And I think that the MSBA is doing that as well with all of the resources on COVID and other things, and keeping up and making statements about important issues, and just trying to say we are here for you. Whatever's going on, if you need to talk to somebody. That's what we do.
So before we jump into COVID, I wonder if you might just give me a quick tour of your website. That 24-hour hotline, that's this number here?
That will get you there. If you dial that after hours, it will say press 1 to talk to a counselor immediately. If you dial it during business hours and somebody doesn't answer right away, and you get voicemail because we're already on the phone, it will say you can press a number and talk to a counselor immediately, and we can transfer you to that. Yes.
Okay, great.
So that's where it's available.
Any other highlights here? I always like to walk through.
Mike, why don't you click on the resources page? I'm sorry, services page. It's up on, you can see the tabs across there.
Yep.
When you do that, you see we talk about this counseling, and if you go down a little bit where you see Sand Creek, on that page, there's their direct number. So sometimes people, I would say maybe 5 people a month, call that number directly. That's the counselors we deal with. So that's available too, as if someone doesn't want to go through LCL as an office. And then it gives more information. We don't need to click on that now. But back to the home page, I can give you some highlights of some of the things that are happening. We are running some groups. We'll have our September groups posted over on the right side there. You can see August resources and connections. And we've got a couple of groups going on, including a general well-being group as well as a careers group. And we're also, we've got a family support group, ADHD, a group for people who are dealing with discipline or character and fitness. We have gathered a lot of information on 12-step and other abstinence-based support groups that people who are our volunteers have liked. And so we can always provide that information. So there's that kind of support available as well. And then, you know, we've made some statements. We write articles about things that we think are timely. I thought it was really interesting to hear things like Gina Cho, for example, who's well known in the profession, I think, as someone who talks about mindfulness. And so mindfulness is about the breath, all right? But then you have this 8 plus minute video of George Floyd saying, "I can't breathe." And so I thought that that was such a juxtaposition for our profession, where we are going to be engaged in every part of social justice. We are going to be engaged in every part of criminal justice around this issue and so many other things. And so we need to use the breath. We need to use that mindfulness in order to be present and be the best lawyers we can be when we're dealing with all of this stress. So that's why that article was written and is posted on the site. So there's a lot of different things to look at, and we encourage people to navigate the site and find the things that are there.
I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about these groups. I noticed that they are, these are going to be remote, but going to be in person when available. Is it interesting? I've seen the AA groups. They often would come into the offices downtown. That kind of makes sense. Like a discipline and practice group. I wouldn't have guessed. That might be something that you want to keep more private, one-on-one. Tell me about how a group setting supports some of these other problems.
Well, I think the discipline and practice group is a great example. We ask that in order to participate, somebody has to be admitted to the group. And so if you click on that group, for example, it will have a description, and then it will say that you should contact my colleague Chase to participate. And then he gives you the Zoom code. So if you don't have that, you can't participate. And it's the same with all of our other groups. The exception to that is the well-being group that we have on Monday mornings, which is just, hey, let's talk about resilience strategies. And so that, if you look at the August Resources and Connections link there, it gives a Zoom link that has no registration required. So anybody can join, and we still have to admit you to the waiting room, from the waiting room. And then our careers group that is listed there, we ask that people register ahead. And then we have one other, which is a little bit different than our usual groups, which is that we're working with Minnesota women lawyers to provide, to facilitate a group on parenting stress. And because that's in concert with Minnesota women lawyers, well, we will say, my colleague Jill, who runs that, will say at the beginning of the group, this is confidential. It's an MWL managed thing as well. And so I think too, we're trying to reduce the stigma about, I'd like to talk with other people about something that's bothering me. And so with the parenting, which if you are a parent, you have parenting stress, or with the general well-being group, we hope that it's not a stigmatized thing to say, yeah, I'd like to talk to other people about these things. Yeah, I'd like to learn some resilience strategies, because, I guess a silver lining is that instead of saying, before we had COVID, way back last year, oh yeah, well, I'm stressed, but I can handle it. And you ought to be able to handle it, or you're not a good lawyer. Some of that, chest pounding stuff that was going on. I'm not seeing that now. It's not, there's not that you shouldn't be stressed, or if you are stressed, you can't handle it, because everybody's experiencing it, and it's in different ways. And so I think the stigma is reduced for that reason.
Earlier, we were just chatting about the sense that we're coming to terms with the fact that this is a long-term issue, which, and I have to say, we were told many times that what was the analogy? We're in the second inning of a 9-inning game, but still, it was not set in. Is that what you're hearing from your callers, from folks? That's what you're experiencing, is there's a new understanding about where we are in our situation with COVID.
Yeah, we're seeing that, and I think a lot of people who are involved in mental health are seeing that. We went from a shutdown that would go for a period of time, and then it'll all be okay, and somehow by fall things will happen. LCL had our first annual Stepping Up breakfast. It was going to be a breakfast to celebrate well-being, scheduled for March 31st. And then we rescheduled it for October. Well, our first annual is 2.0 next spring, because there's no way we're going to put people at risk this fall. And of course, I think we would get a lot of pushback if we tried to do that. And so a lot of that's happening with a lot. What we saw initially was, I've got to figure out how to put something in place temporarily. So in other words, it's, you know, masking tape and paper towels will make this work. And now, and people have gradually done things to have a better longer term solution. But now it's, I'm going to be doing this for a while. I better have a better system. In the spring, there were a couple months left of the school year. Okay, what do we have to do to scramble and make this happen? Now, most parents are facing, my fall is going to be completely different. The stress is incredible. And how are people going to be able to work and be, you know, we feel like, okay, I'm not doing my work as well as I want to. I'm not doing my parenting as well as I want to. We feel like we're failing at both, when in fact we have to reevaluate what we see as succeeding. Because
that's such a great, interesting point. I mean, we were just talking about the trappings of our professional life and how those kinds of things, you know, dressing up our office, or me actually putting pants on to come down to go to work, that some of these things are very tangible, fixable things. But if you have kids, I'm just so thankful that my kids are grown and have their own professional lives. You know, I'm just like, I can't, because I remember what it was like to sort of be thankful. Well, not sort of, I was very thankful when the school year came back around, right? That they were ready for it, right? Because kids are, you know, they want to be gainfully employed as much as anyone else.
Yeah.
You know, so how are you and your organization thinking about strategies for dealing with that dual role, parent, professional, in a world where we don't have the trappings to sort of make that happen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, most of what I have seen out there, and it seems like every mental health office in Minnesota that has a newsletter has sent one in the last 3 days about parenting. It's all about, how do you create a better situation for your kids? And I guess if your kids are less stressed, you're going to be less stressed. And they're saying things like, what can you do to create and prepare a better routine, so that this is what I know I'm going to expect, that it's flexible, and that the kids are less uncertain because they're going to be less scared around that. And this goes for, you know, high school age kids too.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to find ways for them to make connections. And some of those, I've heard stories from lawyers about their kids setting up the socialization opportunities that the parents didn't have the technological knowledge to do, and the kids are doing it. So how do you connect with others? Maybe it's an online game that people play together, supporting that instead of, well, you just can't see your friends. That's not going to work because your kids are going to act out. What are you doing physically? Because you've got that extra energy, and what can you do with it? And how do you put that in? And then looking at education as, it's not just when they're in front of the screen, but just as we're trying to integrate, we're being with our kids and we're on a Zoom meeting for work. Are you cooking dinner together and you're talking about measuring and doing other things that might involve science or math concepts, that kind of thing, as a way to have the school day be something that continues? You know, and watching your kids. I mean, if they don't want to get dressed, if they don't want to wash, if they're not wanting to be with their friends, if they seem to have trouble concentrating, if those kinds of things are happening, if they're not able to sleep or they wake up during the night, there may be some depression. There may be something worth looking at. And that's something that we should look at in ourselves as well. The parents aren't getting enough sleep. And in some ways, we're going through a grief process, both anticipatory grief because we don't know what to expect, as well as actual grief over things we might have lost, whether we've lost a job, if we've lost a loved one, if we're concerned about people being at risk, and maybe we have a relative who doesn't think it's an issue and goes and visits our elderly parents when we have tried so hard to keep them safe. All of these things can cause stress to the parents as well. And we are getting some calls from people who say, I just need to talk to somebody about how to take care of me. And I think that that's something that it will be important to recognize that, yes, you are managing your work and you're managing your family. I like to put it as we have these two silos. We have work and we have home, and now they're together and they're not meshing very well. And I heard someone else refer to it as I'm living at work. I'm not working from home, I'm living at work.
Yeah.
Some people are going to the office.
Yeah, I know. I've been at my desk at 8:30. There's no reason my office is here. Why not be working at 8:30 p.m. Right? On the parenting side, it seems like there's sort of a double whammy there. Already as a professional, I suppose, we have this idea that it's selfish to take some downtime because we owe a professional duty to our clients, to the profession, to our colleagues, and it's just selfish. It feels selfish as a parent to take some me time, to take some self-care. How do you talk about sort of managing professionally those kinds of what do you call them? The background information, the myths of being a good parent or a good professional.
Yeah. Well, one way to look at it is that in order to be a competent lawyer, you take CLE courses, you get involved with a bar association, you join the section for your practice area, you talk with other people, you're on the listserv where you can say, hey, I've got a new situation, anybody want to talk to me about it? These are things we do to be competent. And in the Path to Lawyer Wellbeing Practical Recommendations for Positive Change report that came out a couple of years ago, there is a tie-in between well-being and competence, for that taking care of our well-being is part of competence. Because if you are not able to really think about your client matter to the point where you can have the level of analysis that is critical, if you aren't able to, even on a Zoom meeting, be totally tuned into them so you can see the nuances as well as hear the words, because you're thinking about something else, you're not going to be able to be as effective at that representation. So just as you will take a CLE course in order to learn the new laws in your area, engaging in well-being practices so you can be present for your client and able to do your best work as a lawyer, I think is also a piece of it. And I think it's more important now than ever. You had asked earlier about, going from the we're going to do this for a little while to practice for a while. And here's what mental health professionals have seen. It's gone from I don't have time, or it's not bad enough. I've got all these other things to deal with, and that hasn't risen to the surface. And now, as people are realizing that they're in it for the long haul, they're saying, wait a minute, I better have a personal plan in place too. And we are getting, we've got more calls this month than earlier. Everybody's calls dropped because people were dealing with basic needs. And now the calls are way up, and we encourage that because people are saying, we're in this for a while. This has got to be part of my toolkit, is having something set up where I have someone to talk to. I am doing some things to take care of myself, whatever it is that is going to help you to succeed in these new things going on. I'm seeing a comment.
From Catherine. Thanks, Catherine.
Yeah. Making sure we focus on what is our highest priority is key. At the end of the day, being an attorney is still a job, and it's not worth sacrificing your health, be it physical or mental. That's absolutely true. That's a very succinct way of saying what I spent a whole lot of time saying. It's just as important. You know, when you look at Maslow's hierarchy of need, you've got health and safety on the bottom, and then the pyramid goes up, and you get to self-actualization way at the top, and we think, well, that's not important. But if you're not doing all of those things, then you're not going to be able to do as well at the health and safety things. You're more like, the more stress you have, the worse your immunity is. The more stress you have, the more likely you are to respond to a situation rashly. In hindsight, say, you know, I wish I would have handled it differently. I wish I would have thought about it first. And that's where self-care comes in. It helps us to make better decisions, and it helps our immunity.
The other thing I like about Catherine's comment here is I think it addresses a truth that, you know, my run, my time with a counselor, me playing with my kids, going for a walk, whatever it might be, those are not billable hours. They're just not. You know, I'm not sure how to think about that in a way that isn't talking about it in terms of a detriment to the firm as a negative thing, right? So are you finding that we talk with a lot of solo small attorneys here at the Bar Association, but there's a broader cultural thing going on there, isn't there? I mean, how do you shift that consciousness from this being a sacrifice in order to make me a better attorney to this is just a fundamental piece of what it means to be a professional, mm-hmm. or a good parent for that matter?
Yeah. Well, what are the things that help you to do your best work? And self-care is one of those. It doesn't mean, you know, there's the idea of company time or billable hours. What was the number of hours that Cleo came up with that people actually know? It was like,
right. Yeah, for folks who don't know, we talk about this all the time. It's the Cleo Legal Trends Report. It comes out every October. So the 13th, I think we'll see the next one in October. But they take a look at all of the data from their users. They anonymize it, they aggregate it, and what they learn is that attorneys on average spend about 2.5 hours per day doing billable work, and the rest of the time is spent on administrative tasks, about half of which is just marketing and half of which is other billing and doing things like that. It's interesting, whenever we talk about it here at the Bar Association, we always pair it with the survey that was conducted by Thomson Reuters. And that survey, where they ask 300 solo small attorneys how much time they're spending, and it's a survey, so it's not objective anonymized data. It's a survey, and what the attorneys will tell you is that they're spending at least 60% of their time on billable hours. So, I mean, it's a much smaller data set. The Thomson Reuters data is about 300 attorneys, or 300 firms, I think. Whereas the Cleo is all of their customers, so thousands and thousands of attorneys. So it may not be exactly apples to apples, but it's just interesting. So a long answer to your short question: 2.5 hours is the amount of time that we're doing on billable. So yeah, I mean, all of that other stuff feeds into how you're performing.
Yeah, and I think that when you look at that, I mean, that's that's the Cleo survey, and it's how, you look at firms that have billable hour requirements that are significantly higher than that, and many people are meeting those just fine. But built into professional development is part of being a lawyer, and professional development includes taking care of yourself so that you're able to be that best lawyer. So it doesn't necessarily mean that your yoga class is within your 8-hour day, but if your yoga class is something that you make sure fits, then you're going to be more productive during that 8-hour day. And instead of working 12 hours to bill 6, you might work 9 hours to bill 6. And that's what those well-being activities do for you. They make you more productive during the time that you're actually working.
Yeah, I'd love to see yoga as mandatory. I don't. It's funny. My wife runs a art center in South Minneapolis, and we lease space. We're essentially landlords. We lease space to lots of folks. The yoga practitioners have something going on there. I have to say, I've been dealing with them for 20 years, and I've done very, very little yoga, but they, I swear to God, look younger now than they did 20 years ago when we first signed our original lease with them. It's something going on there. But I think, and I guess Catherine's suggestion there too is, it feels like some of these things need to have I'm forgetting the word, they need to be incorporated in a way that is real into our daily practice. Whatever that self-care is, we shouldn't have to hide it, right? I mean, the stigma.
Right. Yeah.
Too early, I'll have another sip of coffee and we'll make this work. But the stigma associated with self-care needs to be eradicated so that it fits into the daily routine in a way that's part of our practice as attorneys.
And self-care can be many things. It might be an active practice, like a mindfulness practice, or a yoga practice, or Tai Chi, or something like that. These are all things that you learn to do, and that you do hopefully on a regular basis. But there's other ways too, which is to have sort of an in-the-moment awareness. A colleague of mine does something he calls spot checking. He's a therapist, and he does this, and he's kind of old school, but he's got these little stickers, and he puts them places where he wants to pay attention. So in his office, he has one on his phone, and every time he's going to talk to a client or is going to answer the phone, he says, takes a deep breath. How am I going to make this a meaningful conversation? Got one in his wallet where,
that's great.
Am I spending this money intentionally? And whatever it is, to stop and pay attention and to take that deep breath. If you find yourself stressed about making a decision, take 3 deep breaths to bring you back to a centering where it's like, okay, I can make this decision, or I can make this phone call, or whatever it is, with the way I want to do it, not having, so that the thinking part of your brain is in control, not the reactive, scared, fight, flight, or freeze part of your brain that is feeling the stress. You might still have the stress, and in fact, a little bit of stress, that helps us work better. That's what stage fright is. Sometimes that can help you to perform better, because that boost of adrenaline gives you, helps you to be more effective. But if you can say, all right, this is going to be tough. So what do I'm going to make a difference for this client. I'm going to leave this conversation feeling like I did my best work. I'm going to be respectful of this person I disagree with. You go in with, you set an intention. And that's not something that involves carving an hour out of every day. Stephen Kiva used to write regularly for the ABA, and he had a column on they didn't call it well-being at the time, but it was also effectiveness. And he talked about that mindfulness as helping you to be present with your client so that you actually were far more productive, because you had to spend less time looking for information you would have been able to gather in that effective follow-up question because you were paying attention. So that's the kind of thing that you can integrate without it having to be something that you spend an hour a day at. Not that those things aren't valuable as well.
Darwin's got a great question in chat asking about resources specifically for minority lawyers. And yeah, I've been following that the walkouts recently from what's going on in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly, yeah, Charles Barkley said something like, it is extremely stressful just being a black man in today's world. Nobody is asking Tom Brady about his feelings about what is happening in the white community.
Yeah.
You have specific resources for handling stress caused by racial injustices, gender injustice, etc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There are some things going on out in the community that, you know, I'd be happy to, I mean, this is something where I could put together a list, but, you know, not in this conversation right now. There's a tremendous resource that we've been providing to a lot of people that was, so July is, I think it's July. Anyway, it already happened, and we did some promotion around it and so on, but it's BIPOC Mental Health Month. So May is Mental Health Month, but it's Black, Indigenous, People of Color Mental Health Month, and there are incredible resources that have been developed around that about how, yes, you walk down the street with this stress around you, and persons of color are being expected to explain to everybody, why is this an issue, or what do you think about this? It's just exhausting. And it's like in our profession where, you know, you have a committee or a board or something like that, and it's like, oh, we need to get an attorney of color on our committee. Or I did a seminar last week for the Criminal Justice Institute where one of the panelists talked about in their firm where they're supposed to be billing hours, they're the one that everybody wants to come and talk to about what they think about what happened someplace. And yes, I'm glad you care about this, but I also have work to do, and this is impacting my ability to do my work because of all of the interruptions. So it's a very complex issue. There's a lot going on. We have worked to have therapists of color, which there are not enough of, available through LCL as people you can talk to. And I think that mental health is a diversity and inclusion issue because any organization, firm, whatever, that says, yes, we're committed to diversity and inclusion, well, if your lawyers of color, especially your Black lawyers, don't feel like they get the same second chance, because everybody does make mistakes, are they going to ever ask for help on anything, including being able to say, I'm struggling? And so we haven't had as many opportunities to go out to firms and organizations since COVID came, but we're doing some. It's something we really try to state strongly, which is that you've got to be looking at this, just as you are looking at trying to recruit a diverse, you know, entering class of associates or whatever. What are you doing so the workplace is as supportive for everybody, and that someone is not the only one talking about this? There's lots of resources. If you look this up, you'll find lots and lots of things about how to be an ally. And for those who are not persons of color, I think we have an obligation to learn how to be an ally so that the load is not on our colleagues of color to be the ones who are always asked to explain things, and assure us, you know, Caucasians that, oh, well, you know, it's not something you did or whatever. That helps nothing. Rather, it's being aware, paying attention, stepping up, and helping us all do our best work. Because part of our professional responsibility is to make sure justice is served. And if people are being treated differently in our profession or anywhere else, it is not. And therefore it is all of our responsibilities. So we have gathered a lot of specific resources that we have made available to people, and I'd welcome the opportunity to have a more of a conversation about that. And I'll just put my, the easiest email to reach me at is help@mnlcl.org. That comes right to me. And, you know, engage with me on this, and I will let you know what we've got and what we're putting out there. You got some stuff on the Bar Association?
Yeah, as you should say, so we do record these events. We drop them into the business as usual folder here. And we like to share some of the resources with folks. So we could drop in a few of these. I don't like this to replace what's more available maybe from your website, but you referenced a couple of items that I think might be helpful as just to pair with the, I know it looks like this, so we'll drop in the video, and then we've got the links to the resources here at the bottom, or it might be you know, any one of the documents or references that we talk about here that you'll have access to. So those are super helpful, and just items that are related to our particular conversation today. So Joan, if you want, you can send those over, and I'll create this page, and we can add some of those resources. I know it's hard to pull them all out of the
I'll do that.
ether sometimes. Yeah.
You know, there was an article several years ago. It was called Written in Black and White, and the idea was that a research memo was distributed to a number of, it was actually distributed to a diverse group of lawyers, and the research memo was created to have a certain number of mistakes of 3 different types. And the cover page on half the research memos and identified the writer as Caucasian and the other half as African American. And the number and level of comments were very different on the 2. So the white Thomas Meyer, that was his name, had an average of 8 comments, and most of them were encouraging, and the African American Thomas Meyer had an average of 13, and many of them were not encouraging. So my question is, which Thomas Meyer is going to feel like they can ask for help? Which Thomas, either with work or with things they might be struggling with? And that's how our profession has to change, so that both Thomas Meyers feel they can ask for help.
It's interesting. So that was a legal brief version of the resume. Yeah, super interesting.
The idea was it was distributed to help people, something about either gauging the writing styles or helping with writing styles of newer associates. So that was the exercise.
All right, folks, feel free to jump in with any questions or comments. We will forward those on. Joan, I wanted to ask you about, and maybe this has passed, I remember when we were chatting earlier at the start of the pandemic that you were getting different sorts of calls, that maybe people were checking in about their business, which is interesting. Certainly that's a stressor, but it sounded like it wasn't, I'm staying at home and I want to drink more, or whatever it might be, or my kids are bothering me. But yeah, it was, you were getting questions about business. What was that? Did I catch that correctly? And what other kinds of surprising questions did you get as a result of the situation?
Well, there's quite a range. A lot of it was the stress of putting things in place for suddenly moving to remote work and just wanting to talk through with somebody. So we had some of those calls, and I'm sure that stress is still out there. But you brought up drinking, and you know, that's been an interesting thing to observe in this.
Yeah.
There's lots of people that we don't talk to, but for the people that call us, here are the issues we've seen. First, you've got people who are in recovery, and they've made the decision that not drinking is the right answer for them. And they're suddenly 12-step meetings went away. Suddenly smart recovery in-person meetings went away. Suddenly they went away, with a very few exceptions that have returned where people are standing apart from each other in parking lots. And so they all went to Zoom, and human connection is such an important part of that, Zoom or other platforms. I don't necessarily want to promote Zoom. And those things are happening, and a lot of people are working, whatever their program is, a lot harder. And by the way, treatment centers are open and they're busy. The second group are those who had made the decision at some point that abstinence was a good answer for them, and it wasn't working, either because of the stress, because of access, because they didn't have the support system in place. There was this whole thing where people were being released from treatment and they were supposed to go to an aftercare program. They were supposed to go to intensive outpatient, and suddenly those are all shut down. We'll get back to you in 2 weeks. A lot of people using again at that point. And so we've heard from folks where, hey, I need to get sober again. And that's great because they reached out, and that's important. And then the third group that we're seeing are those where, you know, they didn't have a drinking problem. They didn't think they had a drinking problem, but now they're drinking every day, or they're drinking, it's mixing with work. And sometimes it's a social thing, but we're also getting those calls where, geez, I just, someone talked to me because my drinking has increased. And when I really looked at it, I thought, wow, I had no idea I was doing this much. I wonder if I have a problem. And so we're hearing from folks around that quite a bit where, well, maybe you do have a problem. But what is it? You know, because drinking might just be something you're doing. It's a really easy thing to do, to not feel this. It's a really easy thing to do to get through another day. It's inexpensive, they deliver. I'm even listening to a baseball game, and I think it was, I can't remember the brand, somebody about, they're sponsoring a baseball game and you can have our product delivered, drink responsibly. Really? So we're helping with what is it that you're not, what is it that's stressing you out so that you are drinking? And can we help you with that? And if this has gotten to the point where you decide that not drinking, that abstinence is the best answer, we'll help you with that. So we're meeting people where they are and trying to figure out what's underlying it. But that's been a sizable percentage of our calls, is people who didn't have a problem or didn't think they did, who now wonder if they do. And that is very much related to the pandemic.
That is very interesting. And is it, it's funny because I watch like Stephen Colbert on YouTube or something like that, and I think, geez, and I've been guilty of this myself, joking around how alcohol is just available for me. Traditionally I have a beer at the end of the workday, but there was always a commute in between now, so it feels sort of weird to have a beer, it's just stepping out of my office, a basement here or whatever. What's the it's interesting to hear that more people are concerned about having a problem that's new to them. Is it the cultural setup here, watching Stephen Colbert have a drink at his desk, which I think is kind of funny, but also I kind of think, well, let's not, encourage that. Is it new stressors, or is it more, it's just easier to access now?
I think boundaries not being as clear. We talked about the silos, and you talked about it's well, I may as well have one now. My father-in-law had an old style for lunch every day. That was just what he did. And that isn't going on much anymore. But I think it's that not having the clear beginning and end, as well as this is a way to deal with stress. We don't have the same governors. You might have gone out after work and had one or two, and then you go home. And now you're already home, so why not have another? And why not open another bottle of wine? Those kinds of things. The other thing we're seeing is other drugs. It's been in the news some, but not there's a lot of news, but opioid overdoses. And it's interesting because opioids affect your breathing. They slow down your breathing. And guess what? If you have a virus, it affects your lungs. And so your risk is much higher. But there are opioid overdoses are still out there and still extreme. We're not seeing the overdoses in the legal community, but we're seeing the use where people are using what they might have had in the medicine cabinet. They're getting more. And we're hearing it from lawyers about clients where they're concerned about the client's impairment. And that's a thing too, which is the boundary. Where's our boundary? Because when you are sitting in your office and you've got these things that kind of keep you safe from getting too personally engaged and involved in things, and then they're gone, and our clients have new personal issues, and we might have the same concern. We're both concerned about our safety. It can be harder to just be their lawyer. And yes, you can be a compassionate person about what's going on with them, but you're still their lawyer, and that's the role you need to play. And another stressor that we're seeing is those fudged boundaries where people are letting people cross their boundaries, and that is stressful for them. So kind of some support on saying no. I've had a couple calls like that where I feel like I'm being walked all over, whether it's in a workplace or whether in one case it was a client situation. And I just need some ways to stand up for myself because I'm just overwhelmed and tired and exhausted and scared, and all of this stuff is going on around me, and I need to be able to cope better. And it's that boundary push that was the trigger, that somebody felt like their boundaries were crossed.
Here's a question I don't know that you'll be able to answer. I'm going to ask it anyway. My apologies, but something I've been thinking about recently with some of the items in Legal News Digest. But what is the timeline, do you think, for reestablishing these boundaries? We get a new thing. One of the items in Legal News Digest, just by way of example, was Alexa. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not. You're never supposed to say the prompt word live. Sorry, folks. But the smart speakers, right? There's certain privacy concerns there, and we don't know how to establish the boundaries with the smart speakers. That service that I just inadvertently mentioned as a tool where you can, I was just reading here, you drop in, right? A family member can, interesting, maybe mental health solution here also from smart speakers. Your friends, family, and colleagues can just drop in. They don't have to call you using the system, and you don't have to answer. They're just in the room with you, and they can just use their smart speaker to communicate with you directly. Well, that's maybe a privacy concern, and there's a lot of consternation and it sort of feels to me like some unnecessary hand-wringing going on about our privacy being invaded. But I think what that has more to do with is just how we establish our boundaries, right? We just haven't been playing around long enough with the technology to sort of understand where the boundaries are and how to set up the security profiles on the systems that we use. There's each technology is a little bit different. So I've been thinking about that theme, especially related to COVID. What do you think the timing is for reestablishing those healthy boundaries in systems which it's just new to us? Our kids are in the room as we're typing away on our computer, and there's a way maybe to manage that relationship that is healthy for everyone, but we don't know what that is. This pandemic might go on long enough for us to figure that out. But what do you think about the timing of that? Is that something you expect to see that we might accomplish within the time period of the pandemic, or not, or is there a way to speed it along?
I love that question, and I don't have an answer, but I can comment certainly, which is that I think that bringing it to people's attention by raising it like you just did, which is to say, if you have a smart speaker in your office, what is it hearing? I got a little pushback here when I said two people brought in smart speakers, and I said, go ahead and plug it in if you want to remind it of something, but otherwise it's unplugged. Because I didn't, even though there's supposed to be things in place, I didn't want somebody picking up a client call, having a conversation, and somehow triggering it. Because yes, there are people paying attention to algorithms and all sorts of other things, and there's possibilities. It was like that was just a bright line that we drew in the office. Even my camera, which is plugged into my computer, is a very simple camera. When I'm not in a meeting, I unplug it. So that's really not quite the answer to your question, but I think it's something to really think about, which is to be aware. There's two parts to it. One is, are there things around you that could compromise client communications? Are there things around you that that you haven't thought through, making sure that things are secure? Because I would expect we're going to have some pretty serious discipline and malpractice cases coming out of unauthorized client communications after this. The second piece is, what are you personally comfortable with? And how do you have the comfort to say yes or no to that? And as you say, okay, these are the parts of technology that are going to be part of my world going forward. Part of what I have to do is to become confident with it and learn how to use it effectively. Boundaries are a bigger issue, though. It's personal sometimes.
Yeah.
It's how you let someone make you feel, and sometimes it's a counselor, sometimes it's just thinking about it. There's a lot of ways. There's great things to read about how to draw your boundaries, and because those are changes personally. I think that's also something that we can make the commitment to pay attention to. So the timeline is when you decide it's important for you. And I think that more people are going to realize that it is. And that's part of going from, I have to juggle this for a little while, to I'm going to be at this for a while, therefore my systems have to be better. And maybe this is one of those systems.
James, that's an interesting question, a very interesting question. Technology as a stressor. Are you getting calls? I'd be very curious to know about that. We talk about sort of the shame attorneys have. I've always hated this. I'll show this. I don't know if it's still available. Law Sites. I love this blog, and Robert Ambrosi is a treasure in the community. I hate to call him out, but let's see, where is his?
Well, while you're looking for that, I can respond. Yes, this has been something that we've both written about and put into our CLEs, as well as getting some calls about, which are having to do with the way we are connected with people, and the fact that we're doing it over technology instead of in person is a stressor for a lot of people. And one of the ways we're talking about that is, if you think about, and Robin Wolpert talks about that as oxytocin as the trust chemical, and that's what happens when you touch someone, that handshake. But you've got 5 senses. And so let's pay attention to some other senses, and let's make sure that you can have that same oxytocin connection that builds trust with your eyes by fully engaging with that person. Now, the problem is that what you see on your screen, like I'm looking at you on my screen, Mike.
Right.
My camera's over here. And so when I'm looking at you, it doesn't look like I'm looking at you. And so that's something to think about, that if you truly want to be making that connection with that person, whether it's a client or a family member, whoever, think about where you are able to touch with your eyes. And that's going to be one of the ways to reduce the effect of the stress of being on technology instead of being able to be face to face.
That's interesting. I've been wondering, I've been thinking about that issue in particular, about looking into the camera, and sort of wondering and thinking about the timing as well. Is I was wondering if it was like the idea of putting the cardboard cutouts in the baseball stadium, right? Of these fake, do we really need that? We can still watch a baseball game without an audience, right? And after time, people will recognize that, even though I'm looking, away from the camera, that I'm speaking to you, that's no longer a disjunct over time. That's no longer me not communicating with you. There's a lot of tips about, making sure that your camera setup is a way that, but we're not all technicians, video technicians. We're certainly getting better at it, but it's interesting to hear that perspective of the eyeballs. This is Bob Ambrosia's site, and I'm happy to see, I don't find it here any longer. There used to be an image here with a bunch of lawyers, presumably, with their heads stuck in the sand. And I always thought that was a horrible way to think about legal tech competence. You don't want to discourage people from picking up a new tool or learning something new. I don't think shame is necessarily a good motivator. So I'm happy to see that that's no longer the image that he uses on this page here.
I remember that image, and we would use it. I would send it to a law firm when they had a lawyer that they were concerned about and thought it was better on its own. And we'd say, well, because it was like the ostrich with a suit and a briefcase, right?
Right, yeah.
Like, this is your firm and Rule 5.1. If you don't help this lawyer get the help they need. So we use that same cartoon. Just one Zoom tip. So when you've been sharing your screen, Mike, and through the course of this, it's been off to the side. And the view of you and me, since we're the people that can be seen. And I realized that I could just grab that, and it is now right below my computer. And I am looking at you, and it probably looks like I'm looking at the camera. I mean, it's right.
Yep.
So there's a little tip that maybe you can drag your screen to be able to look at the person and the camera. See, there we're back, and make that connection. I think, right. Whatever it is, it's like for a while people were talking about, it's not bad enough yet, or I've got too many other things on my plate. But you're going to be able to manage those things on your plate if you're adding well-being to that, if that's one of the things you do. And if you don't know where to start, it's not a gigantic hoop to jump through to call LCL, because we're a place to start. And if we don't know, we'll look for something. I get the most interesting calls about things that are not within our mission, but I will do everything I can to find a resource for somebody, and so will the rest of our staff.
Joan, thank you so much for joining us. I'm sorry I have to call time. Very nice to chat with you. Great conversation.